She wore Chanel No. 5 for 31 years. And last month she came to me and asked me to help her find something new. Because a chemist reformulated the batch, a supply chain shifted somewhere in grass, and the perfume she trusted with her identity smelled like a stranger on her own skin. That's not a rumor. That's a woman standing in a department store crying quietly into her wrist, and it happens more than the industry wants you to know. So I did something most beauty channels won't do. I pulled 5 of the most talked about luxury releases, marketed specifically at women over 50, wore each one for a full 7 days, tracked how they aged on my skin at hour 1, hour 4, and hour 8, and cross-referenced every claim on the box against what actually happened in real air, real humidity, real life. What I found will change which bottle you reach for tomorrow morning. And I'm not going to tell you the winner yet. Here's why this particular test matters more than the dozen fragrance roundups sitting in your recommended feed right now. Most of those videos are written by 26-year-olds who have never had a hot flash reroute their entire scent chemistry, who have never watched a fragrance they loved for 2 decades suddenly smell wrong because their skin's pH shifted with menopause, who have no idea that the #1 complaint among women over 50 isn't, which perfume smells best, it's, why doesn't anything smell like me anymore? The industry knows this. They know your skin is changing. They know your nose is more discerning after decades of training. And they still market to you with the exact same florals and the exact same language they used when you were 28. That's not an oversight. That's a strategy. And it relies on you not asking questions. I'm asking them for you. Let's start with the one you've probably already got sitting on your vanity, because it's the one every counter girl pushes first. Maison Soleil's Nuit de Velours is positioned as the mature woman's rose. The packaging alone whispers old money, heavy glass, a ribbon that costs more than it should. It runs $215 for 50 milliliters, which already tells you who they think you are. On skin, it opens with a rose so saturated it borders on jammy, wrapped in enough patchouli to feel expensive rather than dated, and there's a genuine moment in the first 20 minutes where it smells like a memory you didn't know you had. What it does well is undeniable. That opening is intoxicating, and I understand completely why women fall for it in the store. But here's the catch nobody at that counter is going to mention. This fragrance was built to perform beautifully for exactly 90 minutes, because that's how long a department store visit lasts. By hour 3, it collapses into a flat, sugary amber that has none of the sophistication of the opening, and by hour 6, it's gone entirely, which means you're reapplying at lunch, buying twice the bottle, twice as often. Remember that number, 90 minutes, because it's going to matter again before this video is over. Then there's Chateau Vermeil's Ambre Impériale, the one every gift guide calls timeless, without ever explaining what that word is supposed to mean. At $340 for 100 milliliters, it positions itself as the serious purchase, the one you buy yourself instead of asking for. The scent is genuinely arresting, a resinous amber threaded with something like smoked tea, dry and warm rather than sweet, and it reads as quietly confident in a way most amber fragrances don't manage. What it does exceptionally well is longevity. This thing is still audible on your scarf the next morning, no exaggeration. But longevity cuts both ways, and this is the part the salesperson conveniently skips. That same tenacity means Ambre Impériale doesn't evolve. It doesn't have a dry down so much as it has a plateau, the exact same note sitting on your skin for 12 hours with almost no movement, which for a woman who has spent decades appreciating fragrance as an unfolding story, feels less like elegance and more like being stuck in traffic. You're starting to notice something, aren't you? That the flaw in nearly every one of these bottles isn't a bad smell, it's a bad relationship with time. That's not an accident. That's the entire luxury fragrance industry's blind spot, and almost nobody is naming it out loud. Next is L'Heure Doré's Soir de Cachemire, marketed almost aggressively at the 50-plus demographic, with soft focus campaign photography of silver-haired women laughing into the middle distance. Priced at $198 for 75 milliliters, it sits in the powdery floral category. Iris, violet, a touch of vanilla musk that reads soft rather than saccharine. What it does genuinely well is its restraint. Unlike the first two, this fragrance doesn't try to announce itself across a room, and for a woman who has grown tired of perfume as performance, that quiet confidence is a relief. The catch, though, is in the base. That soft powder you fall for in the first hour is hiding a synthetic musk that, on roughly 1 in 4 skin types, turns slightly metallic after extended wear. Not unpleasant exactly, but distinctly off, like the fragrance equivalent of biting foil. The brand will never tell you this because it doesn't happen to everyone, and they've decided that's an acceptable risk for you to discover alone, after you've already paid for the bottle. Ambre and Queer's Rive Sombre comes next. And this one is different. It's the Leather House. The one industry insiders whisper about but general audiences barely know exists. At $265 for 50 milliliters of concentrated extrait. This is not a beginner's fragrance. It opens with birch tar and cracked leather, sharp enough to make you second-guess your decision in the first 90 seconds, before settling into something extraordinary. A smoky, almost whiskey-adjacent warmth that feels genuinely adult in a way none of the previous four manage. What it does exceptionally well is signal taste. Women who wear this are rarely asked, "What's that perfume?" They're told, "That's an incredible perfume," which is a different compliment entirely. The catch is projection control, or the total absence of it. This fragrance does not know how to whisper. In an office, at a dinner, in an elevator, Rive Sombre fills the space whether you intended it to or not, and for a woman who has spent 50 years learning the art of entering a room with intention rather than announcement, that lack of control can feel less like luxury and more like losing the wheel. Before I get to the fifth bottle and the winner, I want to point you towards something I put together after this testing process, because I kept getting the same question in my inbox every time I posted about longevity testing. There's a breakdown in the description below of exactly how I track dry down stages at home without lab equipment, plus direct links to every fragrance mentioned today at the best verified prices I could find. I wish someone had handed me this before I spent 3 years guessing. So how did I actually score these? Because smells nice was never going to cut it for a test like this. 4 criteria, and none of them are the ones you'll find on a typical review site. First, skin chemistry resilience. How the fragrance behaves not just on my skin but across 4 different testers with different pH levels. Because a perfume that only works on one skin type isn't a great perfume, it's a lucky match. Second, narrative arc. Whether the scent tells a story across 8 hours or simply repeats itself. Because a woman who has been wearing perfume for 30 years has earned the right to be bored by monotony. Third, what I call room permission. The ability to control exactly how much of yourself you're sharing with a space. Because at this stage of life, subtlety is a power move, not a compromise. And fourth, cost per wearable hour. Not the sticker price, but the actual price divided by how long the fragrance performs at its best, because a $340 bottle that dies in 3 hours is quietly more expensive than a $200 bottle that lasts 8. The winner is Bijou de Nuit Étoile Filante, $228 for 60 milliliters of eau de parfum. And I want to be completely clear that this isn't close. Against skin chemistry resilience, it performed consistently across every single tester regardless of pH, something none of the other 4 managed. Against narrative arc, it does something the others don't even attempt. It opens with bergamot and pink pepper, moves through a heart of jasmine sambac around the 90-minute mark, the exact moment I told you to file away earlier, and lands in a soft sandalwood and benzoin base that's still present, but never static at hour 8. Against room permission, it has the rare quality of being detectable only within arm's reach, unless you want it otherwise. Which means you control the story instead of the fragrance controlling it for you. And against cost per wearable hour, it quietly beats every bottle on this list, including ones costing $100 more. I wasn't the only person who landed here. I sent unmarked samples to 2 people whose opinions I trust more than my own. A longtime fragrance consultant, who's been blending for private clients for over 20 years, and a collector who owns close to 400 bottles and has genuinely smelled everything. Neither knew what the other tested, and neither knew my results. The consultant came back saying it was the only fragrance in the batch that aged like a person instead of a product. Her words, not mine, and it mirrored almost exactly what I'd written in my notes the week before about narrative arc. The collector, independently, flagged the 90-minute jasmine transition as the moment the fragrance stopped trying and started telling the truth. I hadn't shared a single note with either of them before they said it. If you're deciding where to spend your money, here's exactly how I'd guide you. Étoile Filante at $228 is the one to buy if you want a single bottle that can move from office to dinner to a wedding, without you needing 3 different perfumes in rotation. It's the safest expensive decision on this list. Rive Sombre, at $265, is for the woman who has already made peace with being noticed and wants a fragrance as confident as she is. But skip it if you work in close quarters with others. Ambre Imperiale, at $340 is worth it only if longevity is your single non-negotiable and you don't mind a scent that doesn't evolve. Soir de Cashmere at $198 is a genuinely lovely everyday option, but patch test it on your actual skin before committing to a full bottle given that metallic dry down risk. And Nuit de Velours, at $215, I'd skip entirely unless you enjoy reapplying perfume like it's a part-time job. The overarching truth across all 5 is this. The bottle that costs the most rarely turns out to be the bottle that respects your time the most. And at this stage of your life, your time is the only luxury you're not willing to negotiate on anymore. What this test really revealed has very little to do with perfume, and everything to do with how long it takes most industries to notice that a woman over 50 isn't shrinking, she's sharpening, that her standards aren't a phase to be waited out, but a permanent upgrade in taste that most brands simply haven't caught up to yet. If this kind of honest breakdown is useful to you, this is exactly the kind of testing I do every week, and subscribing means you won't miss the next one. Tell me in the comments, when a fragrance you'd worn for years suddenly stopped smelling like you, did you chase the old scent? Or did you let it go and find something new, the way I did with that woman and her 31 years of Chanel No. 5?